I am delighted to announce that Intel is back. Their brand new Ultra X9 CPU, it does live up to the hype. It is as powerful as Arrow Lake H, that's the chip that was found in high-performance laptops last year, like Asus's famous Zephyrus G16. And it's able to do this at Lunar Lake power draws, which was the chip found in thin and light laptops that gave you excellent battery life. This means you can finally have it all: strong CPU performance and long battery life in an x86 Windows laptop. But there's more. This new integrated GPU is absolutely fantastic. Performance that rivals entry-level GPUs from Nvidia, at least at lower wattage. And because this processor is so power efficient, you can get all this performance in a super thin and light laptop that is silent and doesn't get that warm. Guys, the team has just worked super hard on today's video. Seriously, 3 people working round the clock testing a ton of laptops. I don't want to steal their thunder, so I'm going to hand over to Sierra to walk you through Panther Lake and specifically how this new Core Ultra X9 chip performs. I'll be back at the end though to wrap up on how it stacks up versus competitors and whether you should actually buy one.
Intel released a whopping 14 CPUs, so there's a lot to sort through. In summary, there are 3 main types for 3 different types of users. First, we have the Core Ultra X7 and X9 processors that end with H. Those are your highest tier options, best for people looking for performance and who also want some performance in gaming and creative tasks. These have 16-core CPUs and a special 12-core GPU called Arc B390. Next, we have the rest of the CPUs that end in H. These still have higher core count CPUs like the prior ones, but they only have a 4-core GPU. These are best suited for users like programmers, audio engineers, and even some students, all of whom don't plan to be gaming or creating on the side. Both these types of processors are a direct replacement of last year's Arrow Lake H line, the Core Ultra Series 2 chips, which also had an H at the end. These offered solid performance, but usually mediocre battery life, the latter of which Series 3 does improve on. Lastly, we have the lower core count CPUs. These will not have a letter at the end of the name and will be best for folks who stick to simple stuff like web browsing, office work, and studying. They are a replacement for late 2024's Lunar Lake. You may know these as the Series 2 chips that ended in V. They offered great battery life, but mediocre performance. Now that the basics are out of the way, I'm going to go over a couple gotchas to be aware of. As always, Intel just couldn't keep it simple. Biggest thing is the fact that not all Core Ultra 7s will perform better than a Core Ultra 5. There are non-H7s, and there are 5s that end in H. That letter at the end will help you determine performance better than the number at the beginning. Secondly, there are many Ultra 5 chips. 2 have 12 cores, and at the other end of the scale, 2 have 6. So be careful which Ultra 5 you buy. Another thing, there is a third GPU option in one of the Ultra 5H chips. The Ultra 5 338H seems to be a slightly cut-down version of the X7 and X9 chips. It has a 10-core GPU instead of a 12-core one. We think this chip has the potential to offer really strong price for performance, so we're excited to get it in. As Josh mentioned in his Outrage video, Intel's naming sucks. We're really confused why this one doesn't also start with X like the other 3, plus all the other issues I already brought up. Alright, I've kept you waiting long enough. In Geekbench, the X9 chip performs well in multi-core. It lands between the Arrow Lake H chips of last gen in the IdeaPad and the LG Gram Pro. It does better than AMD's Ryzen 9 chip in the OmniBook and Qualcomm's Snapdragon chip in the Slim 7X as well. The MacBook Pro with the M4 Pro chip and the Flow Z13 with Strix Halo have a very solid lead here. These are also laptops with powerful CPUs and great integrated graphics. The MacBooks also maintain a very large lead in terms of single-core score in all our graphs. The reason we're comparing to expensive devices like the Macs is because the X9 is the highest-end chip. We expect it to be found in laptops ranging from mid-thousands to mid-2000s. We'd love to be wrong if it's cheaper, though. This is just how we decided which laptops to show. Now, on to Cinebench, which tests max performance. We're currently transitioning between Cinebench 24 and 26 since it just came out, so some of our graphs will be using the older 24 version until we're completely done with the transition. In 24, the Duo keeps up with the M5 MacBook Pro in multi-core. It beats laptops with last-gen chips, landing near the top of the graph, still lagging behind the M4 Pro Mac and the Flow with the Strix Halo chip, aka AI Max 395. In 26 Cinebench, they renamed the tests to be more accurate as single and multi-thread. Here in single-thread performance, we actually see a lift over last generation from the X9 388H instead of their tie in 2024. About an 8% improvement here. Clearly, 26 Cinebench has some new optimizations for newer processors. Unsurprisingly, the Macs keep their lead. In 26 multi-threaded performance, it's a similar story to the other graphs. The X9 maintains great Arrow Lake H performance while still falling behind our two highest-end chips on the graph. Now, what this performance doesn't show you is efficiency, which this new chip does quite well. In case you haven't seen this graph before on our channel, we plot Cinebench performance on the y-axis and average power draw along the x. Lower power draw and higher performance is the goal here. This is important because in a laptop, more power consumption can make the laptop feel warmer, have louder fan noise, and shorter battery life. Unlike last gen, Intel is now ahead of AMD's Ryzen 9 HX370 Strix Point chip. It delivers slightly better performance at similar power draws. We only just got a laptop with AMD's 2026 Gorgon Point in, and this Panther Lake X9 CPU appears much more efficient than that too. Their Strix Halo chip, which launched last year, however, was a big leap, as you can see in pink on the graph. Where people might prefer Panther Lake is its lower power draw, which means it will be found in thinner and lighter laptops. Comparing the 16-core X9 to an 8-core Lunar Lake, it has the same power draw, while delivering 60% more performance. This is fantastic. This doesn't surprise us, though, as higher core count chips tend to be more efficient. We're not sure the 8-core Panther Lake versions will maintain this efficiency, but we'll get those numbers to you as soon as possible. Rounding out this graph, Apple's M5 10-core is still more efficient, and the M4 Pro 14-core is even more impressive. Same hypothesis, the 14-core M4 Pro has more cores, so we believe that's one of the key reasons. One of the benefits of better efficiency is usually lower CPU temps and less resulting heat and fan noise, which holds partially true in the Duo's highest performance mode. Its CPU temps stay very reasonable, under 90 degrees Celsius on average. Internal CPU temps is more dependent on each laptop's specific cooling solution, so this may change on other models. Also, Josh wanted me to mention the MacBook Pro getting very hot here is not as bad as it seems. Compared to Windows manufacturers, Apple keeps their devices close to silent and lets them run hotter as a trade-off. He uses Mac's fan control on his to up the fan speed a little. Still inaudible to him, but it keeps his cooler. He hates that Apple makes him do this, but it does work. Regarding heat you feel during performance tasks, Panther Lake looks promising. But the Duo is a bit of a unique device. There is an additional layer between the components and the keyboard than a normal laptop has, since the keyboard is detachable and sits on top of the second screen, so keep that in mind. The Flow also has a detachable keyboard, but it doesn't have any components underneath it, so its keyboard temps are irrelevant. Looking at fan noise, the Duo is on the upper end, but this doesn't tell the full story. We also test its different performance modes, and balanced is a much more reasonable option here. It performs 13% worse, sure, but we'd still recommend balance since it maintains most of the performance. The fan noise is nearly dead silent. 42 decibels is low enough that I have to turn off our AC, and my door has to be shut to actually read it properly. Ambient volume in my room is about 39, so this was truly quiet for the performance it was getting. In your average room, it's completely silent in its lowest mode. After looking at this, we can see why manufacturers like Dell might be limiting the average TDP to 35 watts in their XPS 16. They probably decided the performance was good enough for most people, and they wanted to minimize distractions like fan noise. Anyway, this was about what we expected to see for CPU tasks. We were promised on par with the older Arrow Lake H with Lunar Lake power draws, and that appears to be true. This is positive. But this chip honestly blew us away in GPU tasks. For example, in TimeSpy, it lands between the lower wattage 4050 in the MSI Thin and the mid-wattage 5050 in the LG Gram. Very impressive. What it also does well here is CPU performance, and this is likely due to its efficiency. You'll notice the Flow's integrated GPU performs the best here, but it falls behind the Duo in terms of CPU performance, even though it was beating it earlier. This is likely because the Flow pulls power away from its CPU cores to give to the GPU cores instead, where the Panther Lake CPU is performing very well at low wattage. Continuing on GPU performance, we were also very impressed with the addition of ray tracing cores in the Arc B390. It makes it pull ahead of the Thin again and compete with the 5050 in the Gram. Not to mention, it's an insane 86% uplift from Arrow Lake H. Looking at Steel Nomad Lite, which is a cross-platform 1440p benchmark that the Macs can also run, it actually beats the M5 here by a bit. The dedicated GPUs and higher-end chips keep their lead, but this is once again a massive improvement over the integrated graphics in prior chips. When gaming at full HD resolution and high settings, which is what we test on weaker hardware like iGPUs, the Arc B390 holds its own against low-end dedicated GPUs being fed less wattage like you see in the MSI Thin. It also gets more than 60 FPS, which is certainly playable for a AAA title. Not to mention, it's absolutely crushing the integrated GPUs in both of its predecessors, Lunar Lake and Arrow Lake H. Moving over to Forza, the story is similar. It gets over 100 FPS, while Intel's older iGPUs are only hitting 60. It's getting beat by dedicated GPUs, but it's still doing better than most integrated ones currently available. In Marvel Rivals, it does okay. This is a newer benchmark for us, so we don't have it run on everything yet, but we see it keeps its 1% lows above 30 FPS in medium settings, which is more than we can say for Arrow Lake H. This is a more demanding game with lots of fight scenes, so if you're playing competitively, you'll need to lower your settings. Now, Intel would be disappointed if we didn't mention that these chips offer multi-frame generation, which is a first, other than NVIDIA last year. XeSS technology has improved to allow for 3 frames to be added for each real frame. Gamers go back and forth on whether this feature actually leads to a better gaming experience, but if you want more frames, FPS in Cyberpunk does shoot up by 82%. 1% lows don't seem to improve though, so keep that in mind. This is unfortunate as most people would prefer to see an improvement to 1% lows than average FPS. This lack of scaling of 1% lows with FrameGen on also happens on some NVIDIA laptops. Using gaming results as our marker, we have another efficiency graph for you. This is a newer graph for us, but what I did here is measure the frames per second in the Cyberpunk benchmark. I then plotted it against the average GPU power draw during this test. To get the same performance as a dedicated NVIDIA RTX 4050 in this game, around 65 FPS, the B390 draws 33% less wattage. It also draws 55% less power than an RTX 5050. This is super cool to see. It seems like Intel is much more efficient than NVIDIA. When drawing similar wattage to the M5's 10-core GPU, it gets 31% more frames per second, which is also very good. Intel beating Apple is crazy. Strix Halo chips, unfortunately, do not separate their CPU and GPU wattage in our measuring tools, so we couldn't add AMD's integrated Radeon 8060S to this graph for comparison. As a whole, that chip was showing around 61 watts total during Cyberpunk, so we are doubtful that the GPU cores are pulling less than half of that. This leaves Panther Lake in the lead here in terms of FPS per watt. By the way, Cyberpunk doesn't hit the GPU as hard as Forza. We have a video about why we use Forza for most of our testing, which I'll link below. We didn't use Forza here because then we couldn't compare to the MacBooks if we did. Again, power efficiency leads to less annoyances. Gaming in balanced mode was a treat. It stayed quiet, didn't get too warm. The 100 FPS number in Forza from earlier was actually from the Duo's balanced mode, because it does better in that mode, probably because it gives its GPU more wattage. Here's the breakdown for each performance mode. The Duo can get up to 54 decibels if you're putting it in its highest mode, but we don't see the point. As we said earlier, measuring the heat on the keyboard is a bit weird with the Duo, but Josh even said the little Slim 7i Ultra at CES also didn't get hot while gaming with its full wattage X9 processor. Other compact 14-inch laptops with dedicated GPUs, like the Zephyrus G14, can get insanely hot, so we are hopeful these thin and lights will keep their cool. For AI, we did a quick LM Studio test to see how it does with the standard wolf, goat, cabbage question. This is using a 14 billion parameter model, and we use the same seed. It does a little worse than the M5, but better than the LOQ with the 5050, which weirdly seems to struggle with this test. It also does better than Arrow Lake and Lunar Lake. Now, we of course had to see how well it performed for creators. We'll start with video editing benchmarks like Premiere Pro and DaVinci Resolve. In Premiere Pro, the Arc B390 GPU seems to do well, much better than most integrated GPUs, and it's not far behind the M5 chip. This means less complex projects like ours are viable to edit. It's a good step forward from the older Lunar Lake and Arrow Lake laptops without a dedicated GPU, but it's certainly not competing with most dedicated GPUs or higher-end MacBook Pros. You can see that specifically when you export the project. Time is money for professional creators like us, so we still don't think these are at that level yet. In DaVinci Resolve, it falls behind the competition a bit, but it's still 46% better than Arrow Lake H, which is a nice bump. This is somewhere the MacBooks excel, and the flow with Strix Halo stays near the top as well. We also test 3D rendering in Blender, where the Duo did very well. It beat the Flow and even one of our gaming laptops with a higher wattage 4050. It didn't beat the Macs, but hey, there's a reason they're the go-to for creatives. It's still cool to see Intel improving so much here. Now, another place we were very impressed to see Intel do well was in battery testing. This goes for both performance tasks on battery and also battery duration for light tasks. The Duo is able to maintain full performance in Cinebench when unplugged. This is somewhere the Flow falters. This is also something Macs do very well. And although Windows manufacturers have gotten better about it in recent years, it's still nice to see every time it comes up. When I saw this, my immediate question was whether or not it could still game on battery, since most gaming laptops nuke their performance. NVIDIA graphics cards just aren't fed full wattage unplugged. So good news, the Duo maintained full performance in gaming, getting around the same FPS numbers in Forza. This gets it very close to both the Graham's RTX 5050 and the Flow Z13, because they both see drops in performance when unplugged. A drop of around 21% and 28% respectively. The Duo even has more stable 1% lows, which makes Panther Lake look pretty good. As far as battery life for lighter tasks goes, like office work, the Duo actually beats our M5 MacBook Pro. Let me say that again. The Duo actually beats our M5 MacBook Pro. Intel deserves a round of applause. The Duo's 99 watt-hour battery is, of course, a major contributing factor, but this is still impressive. Just to even the score, we did normalize our battery results as if each laptop had a 70 watt-hour battery. The Duo then came in second, but that's still a good result. Now, we didn't have time in this video to test battery life while gaming, but let us know with a comment below if you want us to do that. Now I'm going to let Josh close us out.
All right, as you can see, this is a big step forward for Intel. I kind of think this is Intel's M1 moment. The chips itself, not as huge a leap forward as that one was, but they're still such an improvement, and the laptops with them, guys, are also just so strong that I think people who buy them, they're going to hold on to their laptop a really long time. Guys, there are still people who bought one of those original MacBook Airs with M1 way back in 2020, and they're still very good today. Now, comparing these laptops to Apple's current MacBooks, we do need to be careful which Apple MacBooks we compare them to. I saw this article saying the Yoga Slim 7i Ultra is a MacBook Air killer. Guys, this is absolutely not a fair comparison. It's just pure clickbait. Laptops with this X9 chip, they're probably going to range around $1,500 to well over $2,000. These will compete with Apple's MacBook Pro range, including the models with their higher-end Pro chips. As we've shown you, Panther Lake, it does compete very well with a base M5 chip, but it doesn't do that well versus a Pro chip. That being said, Intel laptops, of course, have many other factors that make them better than a MacBook. Broader application compatibility, especially in games, diverse form factors, bells and whistles like dual screens, touchscreens, and 2-in-1 capabilities. As a whole, I think these new Panther Lake laptops will be very competitive with Apple's range. Now, compared to laptops with Qualcomm's X2, we still have a lot of testing to do here. My gut is this: Qualcomm is kind of giving you more of what you don't need from their chips, CPU performance, but they aren't solving enough of what you do need, broader application compatibility, although they are improving there. I feel Qualcomm is still going to be relegated to competing based on price and value. Now, compared with AMD, which is probably Intel's biggest competitor, AMD, bit of a mess right now. Their Strix Halo processor, which is really good, just isn't available in many laptops. Then their mainstream Gorgon Point chips, they're basically a rebrand of the chips they released in 2024. Back then, those chips were really far ahead, but now Intel has just caught up. In fact, because of Intel's GPU, they're solidly ahead. If the same laptop had the choice of a Panther Lake X chip or a Gorgon Point one, that AMD laptop, it really needs to be around $400 cheaper. Well guys, what do you think? Will you be buying one of these new Panther Lake laptops? And if you do, you know what I'm going to say. You have to check out our website, bestlaptop.deals. Over there, we are demystifying laptop shopping. We show you the top laptops for each type of buyer. You can even combine use cases together, and we track prices right across retailers so you know who's offering the best deal. Well, today it was all about the X9 chip, which was the embargo for today. Over the next couple of weeks, we'll be releasing a ton more videos. We'll be reviewing all the Panther Lake laptops, of course, and we'll be testing the other Panther Lake chips. So get subscribed with the notification bell on because you'll want to be the first to know. On behalf of all of us here, have a great rest of your day, and we will catch you later.